Here's your wrestling news for March 30th, 2023, and we're kicking off today with Vince McMahon, as for decades, fans assumed he'd never retire from WWE, and after he did, fans assumed he'd never be back. Clearly, McMahon has a tendency of proving those fans wrong, and for anyone who doubted he'd be at this weekend's WrestleMania, prepare to be wrong again. PW Insider reports that McMahon will be at this weekend's event in what will be his second time at a WWE show since before his retirement in July of last year. We should stress that there is no confirmation on whether McMahon will appear on the broadcast, and if he does, the 77-year-old executive chairman should prepare for a hostile response from fans. While WWE has assured the roster that McMahon isn't planning a return to creative, many aren't so sure given that he was at the March 6th Raw, and we doubt his presence at WrestleMania will help calm those concerns. As the executive chairman of WWE, McMahon has the power to go where he wants in the promotion, and would you want to see Vince on camera at WrestleMania, or should he stick backstage? Time will tell if Vince McMahon shows up on camera this weekend, but one name who isn't expected to is Bray Wyatt, who continues to be missing from programming due to an illness. Before his illness, Wyatt had been set to face Bobby Lashley, but all references to that feud have been dropped, so what's next for the almighty former WWE champion? When asked that exact question by Denise Salcedo, Lashley said that he is looking for a match at WrestleMania, but plans for him remain up in the air. What we do know is that Lashley will be in this Friday's Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, and since the match was moved to SmackDown, no winner has gone on to compete the following night at WrestleMania. Lashley hopes that he will break this trend, and said in the interview that a strong showing in the match could lead to something for WrestleMania. The fact that Lashley is allowed to openly discuss not being used at WrestleMania implies that WWE has something up their sleeve, but we'll just have to wait and see what those plans for Lashley are. Over to AEW next, as this week's Dynamite saw Kenny Omega in the main event, defending the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship against New Japan's Jeff Cobb. While Omega would retain his title, his win would be short-lived as he'd be confronted by the Blackpool Combat Club, who were poised to attack the cleaner. Fortunately for Omega, Bryan Danielson's music hit, marking the American Dragon's first appearance for AEW in 3 weeks, though he showed a much different side to him. At first, Danielson was able to force the BCC to back off and even helped Omega to his feet, before shockingly turning heel and leveling the Canadian with a running knee strike. This prompted the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club to begin their assault, confirming their heel turns which had been building amid Bryan's absence. When Danielson said on the March 8th episode that he had to go home, some speculated that he was leaving AEW, returning to WWE, or returning to ROH, but we know now that Danielson went home and found his more vicious heel persona. Omega was laid out by the Blackpool Combat Club after his match, but this was nothing compared to the very real injury suffered by one member of the AEW team. Earlier in the show, the Blackpool Combat Club attacked Hangman Adam Page, and Jon Moxley would punch Don Callis in the segment, and Don was seen bleeding as the show cut to commercial break. In a report from Mike Johnson of PW Insider, it was revealed that Callis suffered a genuine injury in this segment, but it wasn't by Moxley's punch. Instead, sources told Johnson that when Callis took the planned fall after being punched, he hit his head on the way down, which led to him legitimately getting busted open. With Kenny Omega now in the crosshairs of the Blackpool Combat Club, it's expected that Callis will feature more on TV, but for now, his focus, and the focus of AEW, should be on Don making a speedy recovery. More from AEW as after this week's episode, the promotion's new show, All Access, premiered on TBS, taking fans behind the scenes of the company. As we all know, the behind the scenes of AEW has often overshadowed what's been happening on TV, so naturally, fans were curious as to what would be said about CM Punk and All Out. Any fans who watched All Access hoping to learn more about the Brawl have therefore been disappointed, as the show skirted around bringing up the biggest backstage story AEW has ever had. The closest that AEW got to bringing up the backstage brawl was the Young Bucks saying that they were nervous about returning after a near 3-month suspension, but they didn't share exactly what caused them to be suspended in the first place. Shortly before the show went live, Matt Jackson spoke to The Ringer and admitted that AEW talent had to tell their production team that some stuff's off limits. Even now, nearly 7 months after All Out, the backstage brawl continues to dominate headlines, but if you're wanting to learn more about the situation, AEW All Access isn't the show for you. Since September's infamous All Out pay-per-view, the big question in the company is, will CM Punk make a return, and if so, how will the roster react to this decision by Tony Khan? It was reported recently that Punk wants to return, but that his recent Instagram post is proving to be a major obstacle in that plan, with the vast majority of wrestlers in AEW saying he should not return. In WWE and AEW, Jim Ross has called matches for CM Punk, and while the idea of Tony Khan bringing him back may seem impossible right now, Ross remains optimistic. On his podcast, JR said that he believes that Punk will be brought back, saying that AEW needs Punk because of his star power, and used the old Eric Bischoff line that controversy creates cash. Though the majority of people in AEW believe Punk should not be brought back, the former world champion does have some allies, including Dax Harwood and reigning TBS champion Jade Cargill. Ultimately, it'll be Tony Khan's decision as to whether Punk, who is close to being fully healed, makes his return to the ring. And do you think it'll happen? And more important, do you think Punk's return should happen? And we're ending today with Dustin Rhodes, as the wrestling veteran has become a grandfather for the very first time. On Twitter, the former Goldust shared a photo of himself holding his grandson Rowan and added that both his daughter Dakota and the child are doing absolutely fine. 2023 will be a big year for Rhodes, who has previously said that he plans on retiring from the ring over the remaining months, but will remain part of AEW behind the scenes. This weekend will be a big one for the Rhodes family, with Cody challenging for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship, and we want to congratulate the Rhodes on the newest addition to the family.